sustainability use cases. It's spawned into carbon credits, right? That whole ecosystem is opening up new use cases and new opportunities for us. So we're getting to a point now where there's just way too much opportunity coming to us. And now it's just, okay, we now got to focus and, okay, how are we going to execute? We can't do all of this at once, but a lot of opportunity. So we're just excited about all that.
Welcome to Unstoppable Podcast with Harry Sardinas, inspiring conversations with influential millionaires, investors, thought leaders, entrepreneurs who are making a massive difference with their innovative products and services, and sharing the challenges and wisdom of how they sold their first million.
How we manage that ego, right? And then at the beginning of my business, I'm going to business. I'm the big deal here. Everybody needs to do what I say. And I'm creating the toxic culture in my organization. After I shifted, okay, I create a culture that, generally leads into organization to the point that they send me home. Tell me, you don't need to come here anymore. We can grow this company without you, which is something amazing that happened to me, right? Just by shifting the culture within that company.
Right.
Now in the tech space, this wasn't a problem. My property business in London. In the tech space, culture is everything, especially at this early age. And there is something that people don't pay attention. The tech founder, they're worried about the technology. They want to create this product that will do the work without knowing that how you relate with that group of people that together with you, what's gonna happen. And I think it's wonderful that you said, well, there are big egos, and I managed to be the therapy office, right? So that's embedded in your culture, right? Okay, you're working with genius, and your job is all those megas working to work together.
Right.
And it's that's the company that those geniuses can actually work together,
100%.
where all of them have different opinions, and eventually you don't know, but you can move forward and keep it together. It's a lot of work, consume a lot of time, but the payoff is huge because this investor that that's what they're offering you so much money to invest in the company. So tell us about the company then.
Well, just a culture too, and to get off that word, but it's nice to have customers but as you to scale, you have to have the ability to execute, right? And execution is a lot about trust. It's a lot about when you're not, or is the person next to you, your partners, are they executing? And then when it comes to pitch, you've relied on work and what they've done to get prepared for this, and if you can't execute on a pitch call, it's so I think a lot of it just kind of definitely trust was a big part of it. Do you trust your colleagues to go out there and execute? And once you get into the point of getting big money and big customers and things like that, if you have a strong foundation, fantastic. So CREnetics. So we were about 2 years of applied research, and I'll keep some of the names out of it, but we kind of went in with this idea and the concept, which is really a reflection of my experience in the marketplace. And I started off kind of in the space market, right? I'll define that here in a second. But the space market's where owners, tenants, and customers go to go to conduct transaction activities. And that usually happens in some sort of built environment. So if Harry wants to go grocery shopping, get his hair cut, he's usually doing in some form of tangible property, right? My point though is a lot of activity happens inside the space market before it gets monetized and built inside, tangible property, right? So the linear path of where value creation happens in commercial real estate really happens in the space market. And, as I mentioned, so I started off doing valuations, market studies, feasibility studies, really understanding market analysis and really just kind of movements inside the space market. And then I, went to graduate school to me in New York City. And then I spent most of the time inside the transaction market, right? And when you think about these, those two relationships, they definitely interconnected, but as I saw in reality, they're very bifurcated. And so that was about when I was, 18, 19 years in the business. And then I read this article that was written by McKinsey. I'll definitely name drop McKinsey, obviously one of the most prestigious consulting companies. And they talked a lot about or at least the paper posits, and this was back in November of 2018, I believe it was published. They posit that 60% of the predictive power happens inside the space market, and traditional space market indicators, right? So when you think about some of those, you think about crime rates, key fob swabs at office buildings, obviously foot traffic, right? And those are that if they're properly stuff, use case, asset class, location, et cetera, provide predictive power, what's eventually going to happen inside the transaction market. But back to the article, if you think 60% is where the prediction is, but it's actually not being utilized currently. It's bifurcated. Nobody uses it to kind of predict the transaction market. But if you take a step back, so you're telling me that a $90 trillion industry, so it's 30 trillion here in the States, plus minus 60 trillion world, 60 trillion the rest of the world. So about 90 trillion. Right. So you're telling me that a $90 trillion industry has only relied on 40% of its predictive power in the history of its, as an asset class. It's a mind-blowing, I wouldn't say theory, but it's a mind-blowing concept that McKinsey put out there. And that's what inspired me to I said, okay, this has got to be real. And that's what inspired me to get into the applied research. We spent a couple years kind of proving that the space market's leading indicator of the transaction market, which everybody knows. But the question is what's the magnitude of it? Right. And when we really started getting into the research and we started proving that, with traditional data providers, I won't name who they are, who they are, inside a vacuum, you can only give you something when you think about like just a basic regression, right? You think about the goodness fit or an R squared, an equation that helps you provide predictability, right? What's that volatility going to be in the next, 1, 2, 3 quarters, years, whatever. But inside a vacuum, that data only provides predictive power that's 20% or less, right? So really what we did during the applied research is by kind of infusing, transactional data points with space market data points, it increased predictability from, 20% or less to 90% plus, which is a fascinating concept because if you start applying, a 5-time improvement in forecasting across rents, vacancies, construction costs, acquisition, disposition type strategies, really kind of any use case across the ecosystem. If you can be 5 times better, I mean, just think about that, right? Across a $90 trillion industry. So that's really what we proved inside the research. And then we said, okay, how do we take this idea and this concept into it that we can scale? And that's where we really started building out the team. And so we spent most of 2024 securing the IP. Academic institutions are pretty ruthless with their IP, so that was a full contact negotiation. And then 2025 was real, full scale product development, and then taking the team from 3 research individuals to now a team of 7. We have some really good candidates that we've been talking to that are in the queue to help build up the sales team, the engineering team. Our story and our visions kind of taken us across the globe. Like I said, we have a bidder that we'll probably close with to take down the full seat, which is really exciting. But we also have some other strategic partners that are in the queue. So you mentioned in Louisville, I'm actually in Chicago. We're actually meeting with a gentleman. Again, I won't name names, but they control over $1 trillion in assets under management. So we've already met the head of partnerships over a Teams call. He loves the product and the concept so much that again we're onboarding beta customers. I mean, we have a very robust pipeline, right? So we're excited about all the traction. And again, when you're building a startup, those early years, again, I talked about team, proof of concept, getting those beta customers involved, getting the right investors involved. It takes years to kind of get to that point. But we are definitely the analogy I like to say is, we're at a point now where we feel like we're either a rocket ship or a speedboat or something like that that's just been tied to the dock. We're really about them. So again, when you think about just kind of providing a 5-time improvement in all those different variables, like I said, the use cases that we are attacking right now, most of it is capital markets. If you control $1 billion plus of commercial real estate, how can we make your acquisition and disposition strategy better? How can we make your portfolio management better? And this whole thing about extend and pretend, now it's getting to a point. Now you see the 10-year treasury. I think the 10-year treasury is above 4.5. We've run some math that break even to retire some of this debt was below 4%. So my point though is, the Fed's not going to come in and save everybody. Cap rate compression isn't coming back. So my point though is we're going to a lot of these folks that have to manage real estate that will probably turn into some form of distress. So, and then we also think about, we are putting it together for a group that's in the franchising space. In the franchising space is very intriguing. I mean, I do a lot of. I'm a professor on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I do a lot of teaching to do site selection. And site selection in that franchising ecosystem is a heck of a lot better. So we're about to do a JV and kind of build out a site selection tool off of our engine, if you will. And then, like I said, portfolio acquisition disposition. I mentioned the applied research that we're doing at, I'll name the institution, I won't name the data partners, but Johns Hopkins. That's focused on climate change. And it's, climate change, areas of extreme weather are eventually having an impact on our business in the form of insurance. So we do feel that the commercial real estate is underinsured. We do want to do some applied research. We aren't actuaries, right? So going back to our principles of really establishing strong mathematics for our tools. And this is into sustainability use cases. It's spawned into carbon credits, right? That whole ecosystem is opening up new use cases and new opportunities for us. So we're getting to a point now where there's just way too much opportunity coming to us. And now it's just, okay, we now got to focus and, okay, how are we going to execute? We can't do all of this at once, but a lot of opportunity. So we're just excited about all that.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential, audacious entrepreneurs that overcame challenges and adversity, providing you with the blueprint of how they sold their first million so you can grow your business exponentially.